So this is a video on the health message in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, and I'm bringing to light things that used to have been kept and that people have forgotten about, and we started walking a different way as science seems to grow and grow in one direction, and we seem to leave behind a lot of things, and we've forgotten many of the things that we used to know and believe. Today I'm talking about meat eating, and this one is pretty commonplace for the Seventh-day Adventists, but I just want to bring out a few really good quotes just in this to promote this. For most people that are following health reform, they've all given up meat already. They would have given up all the dairy. They're pretty much total vegetarian or vegan is what it is, but that's still progressive. And what we need to understand is that truth is progressive. And the last, I only have 3 quotes that I'm going to read, and this is from Ellen White. And the third one shows the progressiveness of it, and it shows how truth is progressive, and once you understand that, then it becomes a lot easier to accept. Because honestly, Ellen White didn't quite get it either when she was told she needed to give up meat. And there was a fascinating incident that led her to having a better understanding of it. And it's really neat. But anyways, I'm just going to read 3 quotes. It's pretty plain and simple, and then I'll probably do 2 more at the end because that's kind of the context of every one of these. And I pray that it's a blessing. And for anybody that's still eating meat, it's progressive. I understand that. And we need to walk in the light as it's moving, because if we really believe Jesus is coming at the end of time, if we really believe this is the end of time, then we should see ourselves accomplishing and fulfilling all the things that Ellen White had said we are going to do at the end of time. It just makes sense to me. So, this first one is pretty plain, it's pretty simple, and it's pretty amazing. Ellen White says, "If the Lord had not furnished all that is essential in the vegetable world, there would have been an excuse for meat eating. But animals are now so diseased that it is now really dangerous. It is unclean to eat meat." Boom, there you have it. So not only should we not eat unclean meat, but now all meat is unclean in Ellen White's eyes. And she wrote that in 1898. So all meat was now considered unclean. So anything that came from those animals, I don't know exactly how she did that. I don't know if she still used milk or not at that time. Some people will say yes. I don't know. I'd have to see it in her writings. And what I do know is that people's memories fail, and so I'd have to see it from inspiration, is what I'll say, versus somebody else saying something about what she said, unless there's multiple witnesses. Anyways, that was an interesting first quote, where it is now unclean to eat all meat. And now we have this one. Now this one is fairly well known. The one I just read is not really well known, but this one is fairly well known. "Health reform is to do among our people a work which has not yet been done," which is true, it's still not yet done. "There are those who ought to be awake to the danger of meat eating, but who are still eating the flesh of animals, thus endangering physical, mental, and spiritual health. Many who are now only half converted on the question of meat eating will go from God's people and walk no more with them. If ministers eat beef, they will preach beef, for animal food has been unfavorable influence upon the perceptive faculties. Many have had a form of godliness, yet they may even preach the gospel, and yet be unpurified and unsanctified." Boom. So there's another just startling quote. "Any who eat meat will go from us." So many of the health reformers that eat meat today, I'm not quite sure why they do it. There's a lot of people that don't have that trust in God. And, Ellen White tells us, well, the Bible tells us plainly, our bread and water are sure. Well, a lot of people will say at the end of time, they have these animals, they're going to be eating meat. When they're starving, the food runs out, and the whole economy's shutting down, and you can't buy or sell. You have all these people that are even health reformers saying they're going to eat meat. But Ellen White tells us just right there, plainly, boom. 1, it's unclean. 2, you're going to leave the faith. You're not going to make it to heaven. So while it's not a sin to eat meat, what it is a sin to do is to ignore the light that God's given us, right? Truth is progressive. That's why it's not a sin, right? God first in Genesis 9 told us we could eat unclean meat, and then we get to Leviticus, and all of a sudden he sorts it out, and all of a sudden you see clean and unclean. It was hinted at in Genesis 9, but it wasn't said there. And there's a progressive truth with the health message. So while it's not sin, what's going to happen is like what she just said here, that it has an unfavorable influence upon the perceptive faculties. It affects your mind, right? Harvey Kellogg made cornflakes to control the animal passions, so that way you're not so, like people who eat meat probably have a lot harder time with lust. Uh, just this is what we believe as Seventh-day Adventists, and frankly, this is what I know to be true. Um, from my life as I've moved, like God has been with me and helping me with many different things, but man, it sure has helped, especially this last step that I took. It was just like, boom, it's all gone. It's just so amazing. So now I want to read this last quote, and this puts in perspective where Ellen White came to in her decision and how to overcome meat eating. She says, "But when the selfishness of taking the lives of animals to gratify the perverted appetite was presented to me by a Catholic woman, kneeling at my feet, I felt ashamed and distressed. I saw it in a new light and said, I will no longer patronize the butcher. I will not have the flesh of corpses on my table." So here we go. Our church doesn't have all the light and have all the truth, right? So here we see, and we often see this, I don't know, there's a word for it, but you have Seventh-day Adventists and you have the Roman Catholic Church, and we're the most Protestant out of all the Protestants, and we seem to be against the Roman Catholics. But here Ellen White says she learned it took a Roman Catholic to convert her on meat eating, right? So it's just fascinating. God is good. God has his people in all the churches, even the Roman Catholic Church. But what we have to come out of is this thinking of even which that we have all the light there is, and that truth is not progressive. And that's part of the battle with the health messages, is that truth is progressive, but it's not regressive. So a lot of people will say, hey, this was true at that time, but we can eat it now because of etc., 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 right? And they go regressive, but it's always progressive, and it will not change that way. So we grow and we never deteriorate. And that's what food is supposed to do to us. It's to help us grow and not to deteriorate. So now I want to read two last quotes to bring this all into context as to why this is important for us today. Ellen White actually says something just totally startling. She says, "If the members of our churches show that they care not for the light on health reform, but to continue to walk in the light and the sparks of their own kindling, they will lie down in sorrow. And the painful part of the history is that the influence of those older church members will leaven the newly come to the faith. The Lord could not now bring many souls into the truth because the church members that have never been converted, and those who were once converted but who have backslidden. What good would these unconsecrated members do to the converts? They would make of none effect the message that God has given his people to bear." Now this last quote brings everything else into context and is beautiful. "Let the pupils be impressed with the thought that the body is a temple of God in which God desires to dwell, that it must be kept pure, an abiding place of the high and noble thoughts. As in the study of physiology they see that they are indeed fearfully and wonderfully made. They will be inspired with reverence. Instead of marring God's handiwork, they will have an ambition to make all that is possible of themselves, in order to fulfill the Creator's glorious plan. Thus they will come to regard obedience to the laws of health, not as a matter of sacrifice or self-denial, but as it really is, an inestimable privilege and blessing."